Thursday news. I'm Bakhtiar Sanovan. Let's begin with the top headlines making news around the world. U.S. envoys meet with mediators in Qatar, but no face-to-face meeting with Iranian officials. European Commission President visits Azerbaijan today. And Afghanistan's Taliban has carried out strikes on targets along the border with Pakistan. Top U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have arrived in Doha, but Iran says it will not meet with them. Qatari mediators are expected to hold separate discussions with both delegations after Tehran ruled out direct talks with Washington. While Iran focuses on the terms of the recent ceasefire, U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed confidence in the ongoing diplomatic track.
Top U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have arrived in Doha. However, Iran says it won't meet with them. Qatari mediators are expected to hold separate discussions with both delegations after Iran ruled out direct talks with the United States. Washington is maintaining an optimistic tone regarding compliance and the overall direction of the interim agreement.
As far as things are going, the denuclearization of Iran is moving along well. They've had very good meetings, and we'll see. We hit them very hard for 3 nights, as you know, but we're getting along very well. So I call it the denuclearization, and it's all taking place. It's all going well.
However, Iran's negotiating team maintains a starkly different tone, insisting that progress remains strictly conditional on Western concessions. Tehran says the priority is to resolve the terms of the ceasefire agreed 2 weeks ago before moving on to more contentious issues, including possible limits on its nuclear program.
At the moment, we are coordinating and holding discussions to ensure those commitments are fulfilled. Until those commitments are in place, we will not move on to the remaining provisions at all. One of our sources of pride is that our defensive and missile power is not at all subject to negotiation.
The initial framework calls for Iran to ease restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for financial incentives. It also sets out a 60-day negotiating period aimed at securing a permanent peace deal. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has partially resumed. However, Iran says it has the right to manage traffic alongside Oman and intends to introduce tolls when the 60-day negotiating period expires. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance rejected that idea, saying Iran would not be allowed to charge ships using the international waterway.
Iran is preparing for a huge week-long farewell and burial procession of its former supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that neighboring Iraq will also partially host the rituals. Turaj Shivalilo brings us this report from Azadiya Square in Tehran.
Massive preparations are underway in Iran to pay tribute to the late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, killed by Israeli U.S. air raids in February. His funeral was postponed for 4 months because of wartime conditions, which lasted 40 days. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that the procession of the body will be held in neighboring Iraq as well. In a post on the social platform X, he wrote that, like Iran, Iraq is preparing for a mass funeral for Grand Ayatollah Khamenei, an event that will undoubtedly be remembered by history and further strengthen the bonds between our 2 nations. The procession will start on Saturday, the 4th of July, and will last for a week. It will be held in multiple cities, mainly in the capital Tehran and the religious cities of Qom and Mashhad, where he will be laid to rest. In addition to 1 day of nationwide public holiday next Monday, it was announced that there will be 2 days of holidays in Tehran over the weekend and 2 days of holidays in Qom and Mashhad to host millions of mourners. Also, there will be restrictions on domestic and international flights, reportedly for logistic reasons, and entrance to Tehran by car will be limited to parking lots at the city's border districts. Deputy Foreign Minister and head of the funeral headquarters, Ali Akbar Pourjamshidian, said at a press conference that more than 30 countries and religious leaders from more than 90 countries have voiced their readiness to attend the funeral. Meantime, Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said in an interview on state IRIB TV that no official from European countries participating in the Israeli-US war with Iran has been invited to attend the funeral. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei led the post-revolution Iran for nearly 4 decades and shaped its domestic and foreign policies more than any other political figure of his generation. His burial rituals are both a tribute to his legacy and a demonstration of post-war political resilience and continuity, which resulted in the leadership of his son, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
Lebanon is advancing post-war efforts after Iran's top negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said Iran, the United States and Lebanon have agreed to establish a committee to oversee the end of the war in Lebanon. The developments come as Lebanon's social affairs minister says around 400,000 displaced people have returned to southern Lebanon following a lull in a 4-month conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, during a visit to what Israel describes as a security zone inside southern Lebanon, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israeli troops will remain there as long as Hezbollah poses a threat.
Because we achieved, thanks to your action here, Lebanon recognizes Israel. Israel recognizes Lebanon. And we are saying to both Iran and Hezbollah, get out of here. You have nothing to do here. There are 2 states, sovereignty, wanting to make peace between them, wanting to truly restore a reality of security and prosperity to the residents of the north and also to the residents of Lebanon. You need to leave. This is a slap in the face, a punch in the face of the Iranian axis, and it will not necessarily pass quietly. We are very proud of what we have achieved thanks to your courageous action and the decisions we have made. Our insistence is that we will not leave southern Lebanon until the threat is eliminated, and as long as Hezbollah, armed, is here, threatening us, we will stay here.
Russian forces continue to press forward in eastern Ukraine as attacks on both sides leave more civilians dead. In one frontline town in Ukraine's Donetsk region, residents are clinging to daily life with the help of a government shelter.
Russian and Ukrainian forces exchange fresh long-range attacks overnight, with at least 3 people killed in strikes on southeastern Ukraine, while Keir reported hitting an oil refinery more than 1,300 kilometers inside Russia. Moscow also said its troops had captured the villages of Kopany in Zaporizhzhia region and Ukrainsky in Kharkiv region. As fighting moves closer to the eastern city of Dobropilya in Donetsk region, many residents depend on a government-run point of invincibility center for water, electricity and communications after repeated Russian strikes damaged local infrastructure.
We run on a generator for 2 hours, from 5 to 7. Locals can take a shower, do laundry. There are washing machines and dryers, whatever's left. In the big hall, there's a microwave and an electric kettle. They can also heat up some instant noodles there and have a cup of tea. There's nothing left. In the city, no electricity, no gas. There was a hit nearby. It knocked out Starlink, our mean of having cell service and internet. People were at least checking in to let their families know whether they were alive or not, so their loved ones wouldn't worry.
Many who remain say they have nowhere else to go or cannot bring themselves to leave their homes behind despite the growing danger as Russian troops advance.
I don't care anymore. I've already lived most of my life. I have nothing left to lose. Nothing scares me. Nothing at all.
There's nowhere to go. There's simply nowhere left for us to go. No one is waiting for us anywhere.
Ukrainian troops warn that if Dobropilya falls, Russia could gain another route towards the key cities of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, making the town's struggle increasingly important for the wider battle in the Donetsk region.
The European Union has begun releasing 3.9 billion euros to finance Ukrainian drone procurement as part of a broader 90 billion euros Ukraine support loan, underlining Europe's growing focus on drone warfare and defense industrial cooperation. At the same time, Ukraine says it has struck a Russian satellite communication center near Moscow. While it's expanding long-range drone campaign, it is putting increasing pressure on Russia's military and energy infrastructure. Meanwhile, Poland is warning that Russian hybrid operations may seek to exploit tensions between Poles and Ukrainians, highlighting that the conflict is increasingly extending beyond the battlefield. Joining us now is Douglas Davis, co-founder of the Ukrainian Alliance for Medical Exchange and Development, who joins us live from Houston to discuss the evolving drone war in Ukraine, Russia's expanding hybrid tactics, and what these developments mean for the future of European security. Mr. Davis, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, the EU has released 3.9 billion euros specifically for drone procurement. What message does this send about Europe's long-term commitment to Ukraine?
Well, I think it says, first and foremost, that Europe recognizes that threat is on its doorstep, that Ukraine has created the most robust and profound modern technology warfare system that the world has ever seen, integrated into a combined arms warfare paradigm that NATO must absorb and adapt to if they're going to face the threats that that Russia could face if warfare expands beyond just Ukraine's border into the larger European theater, and or if there are kinetic consequences to the ongoing great powers competition with China and many of the proxies that work as a part of this war machine, including Iran and other elements across the globe.
Mr. Davis, in your view, has drone warfare fundamentally changed the balance of power in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
It's completely changed the balance. I mean, you've seen a country that is dwarfed in size and economic capacity. It's the classic David versus Goliath type picture, where Ukraine, facing existential necessity, basically pulled out through its just remarkable innovation, ingenuity, and improvisation an asymmetric response to a much larger global superpower, or supposed global superpower, and has shown them that that it has exposed Russia for essentially the paper tiger that it really is.
So Ukraine claims it struck a Russian satellite communications center near Moscow. How significant are attacks on communications and command infrastructure?
Oh, this is absolutely critical. It's an often underappreciated component of the way modern warfare is conducted. Modern combined arms warfare, the most critical element in that is not tanks or warships or things like that. It's actually the communication systems, which are principally sit in the low Earth orbit, the LEO, the MEO, and the HEO, and the satellite systems that integrate the intelligence with the troops on the ground, and so Ukraine taking the fight to those elements. Other things that have occurred recently, like Russians losing access to their Starlink. You've seen how that has had critical impacts on the Russians' ability to wage warfare, and Ukrainians are taking the fight to that infrastructure.
And despite these strikes, President Vladimir Putin shows no sign of a change in course. What would actually be required to alter Russia's strategic calculations?
Well, there's the theater of the public-facing appearances there, but you read between the lines, look at what is going on in Russia, Look at the mile-long queues at petrol stations from across occupied territory in Crimea into Moscow itself. You have the Russian people now experiencing just one small taste of what the Ukrainians have been enduring for over 4+ years. And look at their response. The Ukrainians, they've shown nothing but strength and resilience through it all. Russians are queuing for gas lines for all of a month, and they're now, attacking each other in the streets over this. So Putin is obviously going to put on the strongman face. He has no choice. But he is, as we like to say, he is, for lack of a better term, a dead man walking. The verdict is out. Russia has lost this war. It is Putin's fault. It is Putin's folly, and there will be accountability for Putin that will come, not necessarily from the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are taking the fight to Russia so that the Russia experiences. But I think most of us imagine that Putin will be dealt with by his own people.
Mr. Davis, Poland's intelligence warns that Russia could stage sabotage operations to inflame tensions between Poles and Ukrainians. How credible is this threat?
Extremely credible. This is nothing new. Russia has been executing hybrid warfare, non-kinetic warfare, non-linear warfare against the West, going back to the Cold War, and never really stopped. It's probably the least well appreciated component of the Russian war machine. Particularly, I think some Europeans understand it because they particularly the European states that were part of the Soviet Union. But particularly in countries further west and in the United States, the degree to which the Russians execute hybrid warfare, nonlinear warfare, cognitive warfare against the West to essentially distract us from the real threats, the kinetic threats, is enormous. And this goes back far into the Soviet era, to the origins of the KGB, from the Cheka, from Andrei Dzerzhinsky. We were warned about these types of tactics by KGB defectors like Yuri Bezmenov back in the 1970s. It's been carried forward from the Soviet era into the new Russian mafiosa era under gentlemen like Vladislav Surikov and the like. And nonlinear warfare, hybrid warfare, cognitive warfare is a critical component of Russia's engagement to divide and distract the West.
Douglas Davis, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your valuable insights on these critical developments. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Norwegian, British and Turkish, as well as other NATO forces, joined U.S.-hosted exercises off the North Carolina coast, rehearsing boarding operations, anti-submarine warfare and amphibious assaults. The drills come as the Trump administration reviews U.S. force levels in Europe and questions whether allies are doing enough on defense. Military commanders say operational cooperation remains strong despite political tensions. However, experts say if the Pentagon moves ahead with plans to reduce NATO's reliance on U.S. troops, it could mean fewer joint exercises in the future. And we'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to news. NATO is reinforcing its eastern flank with a new command structure for the Baltics as the United States and Germany reaffirm their commitment to defend the alliance against potential Russian aggression. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has the details.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the U.S. and Germany are sending a message of unity to NATO's eastern flank, vowing to stand firmly behind the alliance's Baltic allies in the face of continued Russian aggression. The top U.S. Army commander for NATO Land Forces says the U.S. will stand with its allies in defending the region if they come under attack. Lieutenant General Christopher Donahue delivered the message from the Estonian border town of Valga as NATO formally assigned a second multinational corps headquarters to strengthen the defense of Estonia and Latvia in the event of conflict with Russia. Until now, NATO forces in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and northern Poland have been directed from a single headquarters in Szczecin, Poland. The new command zone will strengthen the alliance's ability to reinforce the Baltics with multinational divisions in Estonia and Latvia now placed under the German-Netherlands Corps in Münster. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius called the move, quote, a visible and strong demonstration of NATO's unity, readiness, and collective determination to defend every inch of Allied territory. Donahue, who hands over command tomorrow, also praised European allies for stepping up defense spending and turning commitments into action. However, the reassurance comes at a sensitive time. U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly demanded that Europe take greater responsibility for its own security, while Washington has begun scaling back some of the military capabilities it makes available to NATO during a crisis. European governments are responding with higher defense spending and larger military commitments, but questions remain over whether Europe can fully replace key U.S. capabilities if the U.S. continues to reduce its role. For Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, those questions are especially urgent. The three Baltic states border Russia or its ally Belarus and are widely regarded as NATO's most vulnerable members. NATO has already warned Russia could be capable of launching a major attack on Allied territory as early as 2029, although the Kremlin denies any such intention. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Keir Starmer has faced one of his final Prime Minister's questions before the summer recess, with Britain's defence spending plans dominating the session. The exchange came ahead of next week's NATO summit, where the Prime Minister is expected to set out the UK's position to allies.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has faced his penultimate Prime Minister's questions, with much of the session dominated by questions over the government's newly published defence investment plan. Conservative leader Keir challenged Starmer over what critics have described as a £4.7 billion funding gap in the plan. She argued the money should have been allocated in the last budget rather than left to a future spending ground. Badenoch said the plan doesn't add up and accused the Prime Minister of leaving unresolved funding decisions for his successor. She also questioned whether the government's defence commitments could be delivered, arguing the armed forces remain underfunded. Badenoch said the shortfall should be addressed through reductions in welfare spending. Starmer rejected the criticism, saying the defence investment plan represents the most significant increase in defence spending since the 1980s. He said annual defence spending would rise to almost £80 billion by 2029 and insisted in any Labour Prime Minister would stand behind the plan. The Prime Minister accused the previous Conservative government of reducing defence spending and hollowing out the armed forces during its 14 years in office. He also rejected Conservative criticism on public finances, saying the previous government had significantly increased welfare spending while failing in what he described as the first duty of government, protecting the country. The exchanges came after the government unveiled its long-delayed defence investment plan, which includes an additional £15 billion for defence over the next 4 years. The decision comes ahead of next week's NATO summit, where Starmer is expected to set out Britain's defence position to allies. It was one of his final Prime Minister's questions before the summer recess. Sena Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
At least 44 people have been injured after a public bus crashed into the provincial council building in Lleida, in northeastern Spain. Emergency officials in Catalonia say 4 people are in critical condition. No deaths have been reported. Emergency crews, ambulances and firefighters were deployed to the scene. No deaths have been reported. Authorities say the cause of the crash is under investigation. Local reports say the vehicle may have lost control before hitting the building. A funeral home undertaker in France says his facility is overwhelmed due to rising deaths during the country's heat wave. All refrigerated storage spaces are at the facility are full, with families, retirement homes and authorities urgently calling to find room for bodies. France's public health agency says at least 1,000 excess deaths were recorded from Wednesday to Sunday, and the figure is expected to rise. Funeral services are also facing delays in burials and cremations, forcing bodies to remain in storage for longer. The death toll from last week's twin earthquakes in Venezuela has risen to nearly 2,000, according to authorities. Thousands of people have been injured and many more have been left homeless. Rescue teams supported by international crews continue searching for survivors, while emergency shelters remain open for displaced families. The U.S. military has also deployed forces to support relief efforts and reopening airport operations and helping deliver humanitarian aid. The United Nations is taking steps to address its growing financial challenges as unpaid contributions put pressure on its operations. A new reform approved by member states aims to give the organization more flexibility in managing its budget and resources.
The United Nations General Assembly has approved a major change to its financial rules. It's ended a decades-old system that required the organisation to return unused funds to member states, even when those funds had never been received. The decision follows recommendations from the General Assembly's Fifth Committee, which handles administrative and budget issues. It comes as the UN faces a severe liquidity crisis, with countries delaying payments of their mandatory contributions and forcing cuts across the organisation, including in peacekeeping operations, staffing and humanitarian assistance. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres welcomed the reform, saying the previous system put the organisation's financial stability at risk. Under the new approach, which will be tested for 4 years, the UN will only return unused funds when they are supported by actual cash received. Guterres said the change would help the organisation manage resources in a more predictable way and improve its ability to carry out the mandates given by member states, particularly in peacekeeping. The decision comes after the organisation ended last year with billions of dollars in outstanding payments across its regular budget, peacekeeping operations and international bodies. The reform aims to provide greater financial flexibility as the UN works to address its ongoing funding challenges.
The United Nations is sounding the alarm over the growing cost of the Ebola outbreak. It warns the crisis could have multi-billion-dollar consequences for Africa if it's not brought under control.
The United Nations says the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo could cost Africa up to $3.6 billion and hundreds of thousands of jobs. It warns that the health emergency risks becoming a wider development crisis. Damien Mamar, the UN Development Programme's resident representative, says that with sufficient resources, the outbreak can still be contained and further losses prevented.
I really would like to stress that we are now at a critical moment in this Ebola response. If we have the resources and we step up, we can contain this outbreak and prevent further losses. If we do not, this health emergency risks becoming a much deeper and prolonged development crisis across the region and potentially the continent.
Government data released on Tuesday showed more than 1,300 confirmed Ebola cases, including almost 400 deaths. The cases were recorded in the eastern provinces of Ituri, North Kivu and South Kivu. A smaller number have also been reported in Uganda, and experts warn the disease could spread to neighbouring South Sudan.
Tensions are rising in South Africa over immigration as demonstrations continue in several parts of the country. Authorities have stepped up security measures following the expiry of a government deadline for undocumented migrants to leave. Isabel Nakiria has more.
Time is running out for undocumented migrants to leave South Africa after the June 30th deadline passed. Across the country, thousands of South Africans have taken to the streets, demanding that undocumented migrants leave their country. Now, most protests have remained peaceful, but in some townships, there have been incidents of looting and vandalism, targeting shops. Now, the police have been deployed in large numbers to help keep order, and several arrests have already been made. In major city centers, businesses have closed early or shut down completely, with many residents staying indoors. Now, authorities say buses are being used to help transport foreign nationals out of the country in an effort to avoid further tensions or attacks. In some areas, including Jamestown, protesters stormed some homes, claiming undocumented migrants were being sheltered there. South Africans are demanding that the government helps improve welfare and jobs that they claim migrants were enjoying. Now they vote to come out to the streets and protest every Thursday until their demands are met. Isabel Nakiria for A News in Kampala.
Trade between Europe and the United States is set to become easier after the European Union removed tariffs on U.S. industrial imports. Brussels says the move strengthens transatlantic trade while keeping safeguards in place to protect European businesses.
Greater choice and better prices. That's what the European Commission President says will be delivered to businesses and consumers. Ursula von der Leyen commented on social media and said that now the EU eliminates tariffs on imports of US industrial products. It's after the Council formally adopted 2 regulations implementing the tariff-related commitments that were set out under the EU-US joint statement agreed last year. She said it reinforces what she called the world's most valuable transatlantic relationship. The new rules also provide preferential access for certain American seafood and non-sensitive agricultural products through tariff rate quotas and reduced duties. They also extend the suspension of tax hikes on lobster imports, including processed lobster. EU ministers say the measures are designed to support stable and predictable trade while protecting European economic interests. The legislation includes strengthened safeguard mechanisms, allowing the European Commission to respond quickly if imports surge or if the United States fails to meet its commitments under the agreement. The main regulation will remain in force until the end of 2029, when the European Commission will assess its impact on trade flows, tariff revenue and economic effects, before deciding whether to propose an extension. The EU and the United States trade relationship represent almost 30% of global business in goods and services.
A senior European Union delegation has visited Ankara for talks on Turkey-EU relations, security, migration, trade and connectivity. The discussions also covered regional issues, including the South Caucasus, where both sides say they will coordinate efforts to support peace, prosperity and stronger economic links.
Turkey and the European Union are seeking to give new momentum to their relationship, covering security, migration, trade and regional connectivity. It's after meetings at high-level talks in Ankara on Tuesday, with the South Caucasus among the main areas discussed. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos, and Migration Commissioner Magnus Brunner were received by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They also held talks with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. Regarding the South Caucasus region, Turkey and the EU said they would coordinate complementary efforts to support peace and prosperity. They agreed to work on stronger connectivity, trade and economic links, and support concrete steps towards that goal.
Competition between global powers is growing. Businesses are looking for more reliable supply chains. countries want more options for trade, energy and digital connections. This gives the European Union and Turkey a shared opportunity, a big opportunity. Together, we can help build a region that is better connected, more competitive and less dependent. Turkey's geography gives it a unique position between Europe, the South Caucasus, Asia and the Middle East.
The meetings also addressed Ukraine, Russia and Africa, as well as cooperation in trade, energy, transport and digitalization. Migration and security were also discussed, including border management, migrant smuggling and cooperation in a complementary manner with NATO. The focus comes as the EU works to strengthen routes between Europe and Central Asia through the Black Sea region and the South Caucasus. The bloc has already launched a connectivity agenda platform last month, expected to mobilize up to €2 billion for strategic connectivity investments. Turkey and the EU agreed to continue high-level dialogues before the end of the year. The upcoming talks are expected to cover economy, trade, migration and security, health, science, innovation and agriculture.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen visits Azerbaijan on Wednesday. In Baku, she meets President Ilham Aliyev. A News Deputy Editor-in-Chief Orkan Amashov has more from the venue.
As part of her wider Caucasian tour, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, together with EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kors, is paying a visit to Azerbaijan, to Baku, and tomorrow she will be in Armenia. It's a very important moment in bilateral relations between Brussels and Baku. There are a number of issues to be discussed, of course. Naturally, Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process, subsequent implementation of the 8th of August peace agenda and post-conflict regional order are going to be discussed. EU has got massive interest in this process. Connectivity is another important element of these relations. Armenia and Azerbaijan together form that territory, that vital geography which provides EU with a vital access to Central Asia, and Central Asia is increasingly important from the perspective of EU foreign policy. Of course, economic interaction between Azerbaijan and Armenia is also vital. We know that this trade turnover between EU at large and Azerbaijan stands at 19 billion euros. It's a massive figure, and compared to Armenia, it's a massive figure because the self-same relevant corresponding figure when it comes to Armenia EU trade turnover stands at 2.4 million euros. So apart from that, of course, we have to remember energy is key part of the relationship there. Azerbaijan is annually sending around 12.8 BCM natural gas to European Union, and Azerbaijan's overall energy export capability when it comes to natural gas stands at 25 BCM. And according to the energy decision document signed back in summer of 2022 when Ursula von der Leyen, EU Commission President, was here in Azerbaijan 4 years ago. According to that memorandum of understanding, by 2027, the annual natural gas exports from Azerbaijan to EU should reach 20 BCM annually. So this is another aspect. Of course, green energy, another element there. We know that Black Sea subsea cable connecting Azerbaijan, Georgia with Hungary and of course Romania is an important part. By 2032, that sea cable must be ready, and its capacity is estimated at 1.3 gigawatts of electricity, and that should be connected, of course, with a green energy corridor connecting Central Asia, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan with Azerbaijan. So connectivity is an important element there. There are specific elements connected with Armenia, and those things will be discussed, of course, tomorrow. This comes at a very interesting time. Naturally, Azerbaijan has some expectation from the EU. We remember that on the 23rd of June, I got just literally a week ago when there was a connectivity meeting in Brussels connected with Global Gateway Initiative. Azerbaijan was not there. Marta Kors, EU Enlargement Commissioner, said that there's a separate track with Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan expects EU to invest in the Nakhchivan link of the Middle Corridor, that particular link that connects Trump Route International Peace and Prosperity with Turkish part of the Middle Corridor. That's another element. Of course, bearing in mind that Azerbaijan is not posing any threat to European Union in terms of migration, visa liberalization deal is also widely expected. There are many layers, of course. The press statements will be delivered later. Ursula von der Leyen is already here. And of course, on the basis of those statements, we will be in a better position to understand the importance of this very important meeting. Well, Orkan Amashov, Elbrus Musayev, A News.
And after the break, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and we now shift our focus to the region. Belarus has announced another round of prisoner pardons as Minsk continues efforts to secure relief from U.S. sanctions. President Alexander Lukashenko has pardoned 32 prisoners. Authorities say 28 of them had been serving sentences on extremism charges, a charge often used against government opponents. The lasted release brings the number freed in recent U.S.-linked rounds to more than 460. But the human rights group Wiesna says well over 800 political prisoners remain in jail in Belarus. Georgia and Armenia are deepening law enforcement ties, with regional security and crime prevention topping talks in Yerevan. The visit points to closer policing cooperation between Tbilisi and Yerevan. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more.
Regional security and cooperation in tackling crime were the main topics of discussion between Georgia's Minister of Internal Affairs, Sulkhan Tamazashvili, and his counterpart, Arpin Sargsyan, in Armenia on Tuesday. Tamazashvili also separately met with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. The official visit began with a formal welcoming ceremony at the Armenian Interior Ministry, followed by a wreath-laying tribute to Armenian police officers who died in the line of duty. In their bilateral meeting, Tamazashvili and Sargsyan agreed to deepen cooperation between their law enforcement agencies, focusing on information sharing, joint reforms, and operational police projects. Both ministers stressed the importance of regional peace and stability for the South Caucasus. Tamazashvili later met Pashinyan alongside Georgia's first deputy minister, Roni Meschi, and Minister Sargsyan, where discussions centered on Georgia-Armenia relations and law enforcement cooperation in tackling crime. Regional security was again highlighted as a shared priority. Before departing, Tamazashvili invited Sargsyan to make a return visit to Georgia, signaling continued engagement ahead. The visit follows a meeting just days earlier on the 27th of June between Sargsyan and Gela Geladze, head of Georgia State Security Service, where the two reviewed existing security cooperation and discussed further joint initiatives. Together, the two meetings point to closer coordination between Tbilisi and Yerevan across policing and security structures, a development likely to be watched closely as a marker of stability and cooperation in the South Caucasus. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Cross-border hostilities between Pakistan and Afghanistan have intensified following a series of retaliatory strikes. Kabul claims its forces launched targeted aerial attacks on alleged ISIS camps inside Pakistan, while Islamabad confirms it shot down 4 military drones over Balochistan. This latest flare-up follows deadly Pakistani airstrikes just a day earlier.
Border friction has spiked after Afghanistan launched rare cross-border airstrikes into Pakistan. Islamabad says its military intercepted and downed 4 rudimentary Afghan drones over the southern province of Balochistan. Kabul claims the operation targeted ISIS centers in Saranan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Local officials say 1 drone was downed near a school in Saranan, injuring 2, while a separate strike in Peshawar killed 1 person and wounded 6. Though lacking traditional fighter jets, IESS data shows the Taliban commands a small operational fleet of aircraft and helicopters, alongside an expanding inventory of combat drones. The flare-up follows Pakistani airstrikes on Monday that killed 28 civilians inside Afghanistan, an operation Islamabad defended as retaliation for cross-border terrorism. Pakistan accuses Kabul of harboring militants, a charge the Taliban rejects, calling the insurgency an internal Pakistani crisis. Despite ongoing Chinese mediation, the border conflict has already claimed hundreds of lives this year.
Central Asia is facing a growing energy challenge with up to 20% of its electricity lost through aging infrastructure. Experts warn modernizing power grids and boosting regional energy cooperation can no longer be delayed. Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Central Asia's aging energy infrastructure is becoming one of the region's biggest economic and energy security challenges. That's according to the Eurasian Development Bank, which says electricity losses in transmission and distribution networks reach as high as 20% in some parts of the region, largely due to outdated generation facilities and aging grid infrastructure. Another challenge is the limited level of cross-border electricity trade, despite the interconnected nature of Central Asia's energy systems. Analysts argue that stronger regional cooperation could help countries better balance seasonal shortages and improve overall energy efficiency. At the same time, experts say the region still lacks sufficient flexible generation capacity needed to integrate renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power into national grids. The Eurasian Development Bank also highlighted the region's heavy dependence on single energy sources. Natural gas accounts for 99% of Turkmenistan's energy mix and 74% in Uzbekistan, while coal represents 63% of Kazakhstan's energy balance. Meanwhile, hydropower dominates electricity generation in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, accounting for 92% and 91% respectively. However, electricity demand continues to rise, driven by population growth, industrial expansion, and increasing digitalization. Experts warn that such limited diversification increases both technological and geopolitical risks, making investment in modern infrastructure and a more balanced energy mix increasingly important for ensuring long-term energy security across Central Asia. It is Sivir Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
New transport links, energy investments and business financing are high on the agenda as regional leaders meet in Baku. The Black Sea Trade and Development Bank's annual gathering is looking at ways to deepen economic cooperation and unlock new opportunities across the region. Our correspondent Narchich Jahangirli has more.
Regional economic cooperation is in focus in Baku as the 28th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Black Sea Trade and Development Bank, or BSTDB, takes place alongside a business forum bringing together government officials, business leaders and financial experts from across the Black Sea region. During the event, BSTDB President Serhat Köksal praised Azerbaijan's economic progress, describing the country as a key transport and logistics hub linking Europe and Asia. He also reaffirmed the bank's commitment to supporting Azerbaijan's sustainable development through new investment projects.
And if the member states' economies are powerful, our bank is powerful in the international financial markets. We have newly issued a bond amounting $350 million in Western capital markets. It was a very successful issuance with lots of investors, diverse investors all over the world. And we will use the proceeding of these issues in our new projects in all member states, including Azerbaijan.
Today's discussions focus on expanding transnational projects in the South Caucasus and the Black Sea region. Key areas under consideration include strengthening support for both transport corridors and energy projects, as well as promoting support for small and medium-sized enterprises in Azerbaijan and other member states.
During the annual meeting, the bank's Board of Governors reviewed bank's performance in 2025, approved its financial statements and discussed the bank's 2026 budget. The Board of Governors also confirmed that Bulgaria will chair the 29th annual meeting in 2027. Headquartered in Thessaloniki, Greece, the Black Sea Trade and Development Bank is a development finance institution of the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation. It supports public and private sector projects across its 11 member states through loans, credit lines, guarantees, investments and trade finance. Narchik Jahangirli, Avaz Hajiev, A News.
This concludes our news update for an hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned to A News for more updates.